Hello and welcome back to Bite Size Boxing. So today we're going to be doing a preview and a prediction for Edgar Berlanga versus Hamzah Sheeraz, taking place in New York this Saturday night as part of a brilliant card. So this is the headliner. I will be covering the undercard fights as well because this is a really good card top to bottom. And it's probably a card that I've been looking forward to one of the most out of this whole year. It's a really, really good card. So I will probably be cutting this video up a bit because there's quite a few points I want to make and I probably won't be able to make it all in one go. There'll be other bits I want to interject with. But let's start off with the fighter's strengths. So Hamzah Sheeraz fighting out of the UK, a boxer who had I wouldn't say a big come up in the UK. He was one of those that he didn't exactly fly under the radar. We all knew about Hamzah Sheeraz, but he was just sort of going about his business in a quite conventional way. He was being fed this sort of normal journeyman and he was doing what he was expected to do. There was a couple of hiccups along the way. I believe he got dropped against a journeyman or hurt early in like the first round at one point in a fight that he didn't look great in. Now, Hamzah Sheeraz, generally speaking, has solid fundamentals. He was very big for the weight, even at 168. He, I believe, turned over at 154, if I'm not mistaken, and then moved up to 160, although don't quote me on that. But he was, as I say, at 160, a big fighter. But even at 168, he's still got a very big frame. He's still a big 168-pounder. A big, strong super middleweight. Very good straight shots. Not as effective up close, it has to be said. But, again, fundamentally quite sound. He's got okay footwork. It's not the best feet you've ever seen, but again, it's not the worst. It's just okay. And again, he's got a very, very good jab. Those straight shots he throws, particularly to set the right hand up behind the jab, are quite educated. So it's one of them ones. He hasn't got the most diversified offense in terms of sort of, you know, hooks and uppercuts. He's okay, but generally it's the straight shots that Hamzah Sheeraz relies upon. And as I say, it's mainly at medium to sort of long range that he's the most effective. Now, the first step up really in terms of up to world level was of course against Carlos Adames last time out at 160. In a fight that I think a lot of people, myself included, going into it, slightly edged Sheeraz in. That being said, Sheeraz didn't really make a particularly good account of himself in that fight at all. He allegedly broke his hand, but it's one of those, do you buy that or do you not? Even if he did break his hand, there was a lot in that fight that I think there is to be worried about going into a potential fight against Berlanga. So what happened was essentially he saw someone who was giving him looks he'd never seen before. So Carlos Adames is obviously quite an aggressive fighter. One thing he loves to do is bob and weave, and he's a very jittery kind of bobbing and weaving, sort of pendulum-like head movement. And Hamzah Sheeraz, from the outset of that fight, pretty much didn't look like he knew what to do, and his output completely dropped. He was unable to land his jab and those straight shots that he relies upon as much as he normally would like. So his output just pretty much fell to zero, and he really struggled. And he was unable to adapt in that fight as well. And it was one of those that, although he got the draw, we know Turki Al-Sheikh favours Hamzah Sheeraz. He's not made any secret of that. That's been quite clear. Even in that fight, he was in the corner jeering Sheeraz up, come on, we need more. So it's quite obvious who Turki was rooting for in that fight. So yes, he got a draw, but of course it wasn't a draw, let's be honest. And I think the concern, if you're a Hamzah Sheeraz fan in that fight, was that he looked incredibly one-dimensional. Once he couldn't land his sort of straight up and down straight shots, he looked completely out of ideas. He had a guy showing him a bit of foot movement, jumping in and out. He was kind of that raiding style of Adames, bobbing and weaving, in and out movement. And Hamzah Sheeraz had no idea what to do and pretty much got outboxed from more or less front to back. He did have a couple of moments in that fight, but generally speaking, it was pretty comprehensive. It wasn't, you know, competitive in any way, shape or form. So if you're a Hamzah Sheeraz fan, even if that is a broken hand, even if he did have a bad hand in that fight, he was unable to land his shots. He looked quite tentative in there as well. He looked quite worried about being hit. And this is another thing. Of course, he fought Ray Ford as well. Just as a quick side note, I meant Ammo Williams, not Ray Ford. Obviously, you knew that. Sorry. I'm tired. On another Riyadh season card, and there was a point where he got hit in that fight and he didn't look like he took it particularly well. And this has been a whisper around Hamzah Sheeraz for the longest time, is that he doesn't have a particularly good set of whiskers. Now, given how worried he looked about being hit in his last fight and how he has seemingly reacted when he's been hit in the past, it is potential cause for concern, particularly against a fighter who can punch like Berlanga. Now, I would also say, just to preface this before I go too much into Berlanga, I don't think Berlanga punches anywhere near as hard as his record suggests. I don't think he's necessarily he's not a puncher that you need to be really worried about, but if you are protecting glass there, he punches hard enough. That's what I will say. So, particularly as a natural 168 guy, which Berlanga is. So, Hamzah Sheeraz, again, good fundamentals, good straight up and down fighter. No special effects really, but a very good jab. And again, a good straight right hand that follows that jab. But the worry is that if he can't land that jab to set the straight shots up, which he couldn't against Adames because he was being shown just the smallest of head movement and a slightly different look, he seems pretty out of ideas. So the idea will be, will he be offensively creative enough against Berlanga to be able to get his shots off? That remains to be seen. In addition to that, the other thing I would raise that was a big alarm bell for me in that last fight against Adames was that his defense looked incredibly passive. You see, some fighters, obviously I'm not comparing them, but like a James Toney, for example, when James Toney was on the back foot evading, he could also get his own shots off. Whereas with Hamzah Sheeraz, he has a very basic, straight, literally high guard, and if you're throwing shots at him, high guard comes up, nothing else is coming back. That's a worry. So he isn't able to really mix defense and offense. He's either offensive or he's defensive. Now, again, it's not necessarily the biggest issue, but you can see that becoming an issue further down the line as well. So against Berlanga, we will see how that one plays out. Now on to Berlanga's strengths. So Edgar Berlanga, Puerto Rican fighter based in the US, sort of had a real buzz in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, although this is a fighter who I've been aware of for probably about 4.5, 5 years, whatever it is. He's been on my radar for a while now, and I would like to start off by talking about the perception of Edgar Berlanga. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. The reason I really struggle to rate Berlanga is because I remember early how he was promoted. So he was with Top Rank, and quite literally, I'm not going to make quite this comparison. He was promoted, but he was in a similar way to in the UK we had Johnny Fisher. Edgar Berlanga was the gimmick in the US. It was outwardly open and spoken. We are going to feed him Journeyman because he's on this first round KO run. So we're just going to keep giving him Journeyman. And hopefully we can build enough buzz around this guy to just cash him out against Canelo. He's not really ever going to be any great shakes, but this is what he's, we can get a bit of money out of him. And that was literally how he was promoted. He was promoted as a gimmick fighter who was never really going to be much, who was just basically being fattened up for Canelo at some point for a payday. And of course, that's what ended up happening. But I can't get that out of my head. The fact that this guy was literally promoted by his own promoter for the longest time. If you went back 4 years ago, Edgar Berlanga was literally just a gimmick who they're trying to fatten up for a big payday later down the line. And they're going to keep feeding him Journeyman because you can get them out of there easily in double quick time. So I'll be frank, I really struggled to get that kind of, what would you say, vision, that perception of Berlanga out of my head. That, again, for the longest time, he was just sold to us as somebody who's not really any good. So now putting him in at a decent level, of course, Sheeraz hasn't fought at the weight before, but we know roughly what we're getting with Sheeraz. I will be honest, I do favour Sheeraz in this fight, because Berlanga, as good as he looked at a certain level, as soon as he stepped up beyond that, and I'm talking not much beyond Journeyman level, I'm talking sort of gatekeeper level. He was in against Caceres, who of course fought Billy Joe, and he was also in against people like Steve Rolls. He suddenly started struggling. So this is a guy who, the minute he's not fighting bin men, he suddenly starts really looking like he's struggling. So I don't rate Berlanga, I've got to be honest with you, and it really seems that just because he survived 12 against Canelo, and look, Canelo in recent years has essentially been in sparring matches, let's think of when he was in against Charlo, when he was in last time out against, what was his name? The Cuban fella whose name escapes me right now, and it was unwatchable. So again, he's basically been having sparring matches for the last 2 or 3 years since having this kind of after he picked up all the belts at 168, he's basically just been having sparring matches. And I'll be frank, I'd probably expect the same in the Crawford fight. But that's neither here nor there. So how much do you read into that? Surviving against Canelo for 12 rounds, does that really mean a whole lot? Just because, you know, he was in there against somebody, you know, it was, again, just a sparring match, essentially. So the fact that he didn't get knocked out against Canelo, I don't think not getting knocked out against somebody makes you suddenly a world-level fighter. And going into the sort of technicalities of Berlanga, he's not particularly technically gifted. His offense is a little bit basic. It's one-dimensional. Again, his punch sequences that he throws are very conventional. It's not, you know, he hasn't got a particularly creative offense, but the shots he does throw are delivered, I think, relatively correctly. He throws his hooks quite well and things like that. Don't get it twisted. I think he throws his hooks better than, say, Sheeraz does. But, again, they're not particularly creative punch sequences that he puts together. In addition to that, yes, he went on this early run where he was knocking everyone out in the first round, but these were against people who had dreadful footwork. Go back and watch those fights. When he's actually being asked to cut off the ring against someone even semi-competent, against the like of a Caceres, he doesn't know what to do. He's there with his not particularly good feet, unable to cut the ring off. And you look at someone like Sheeraz, who does have long levers, he's got long arms, he's got the frame for it. You can see a way that Sheeraz will be able to sit back behind that jab and particularly maybe, you know, be able to outbox Berlanga. So it's one of them ones. I mean, I'm not really going as in-depth with Berlanga's kind of technical attributes because there isn't really too much to go in-depth with. This is a fighter who is quite one-dimensional as well, in his own kind of way. He is quite basic. Now, there are things that Berlanga can do to possibly offset this. As I say, if Berlanga can use a bit of head movement, which, of course, we saw Adames use, that was incredibly effective against Sheeraz. So if he can adopt maybe a bit of head movement as well, maybe a little bit of side-to-side head movement, the same we saw with Adames, he may well have good sort of success with that. But I just think he's far too basic in the way that he cuts the ring off. And again, maybe this is the wrong way to view a fighter, but I just can't get this perception out of my head where for the longest time Berlanga was sold to us as somebody who was no good. He was just a gimmick that we're just trying to fatten up for Canelo. And that's how he was sold to us. So post-Canelo, where he's just gone in, had a sparring session and not got knocked out, I don't suddenly view him as higher because of that. Because this was always the aim with Berlanga from the offset. You know, this was where he was supposed to get to. And there's not really been anyone in between that kind of Caceres and Steve Rolls kind of fighter to make me confidently back Edgar Berlanga. At least with Hamzah Sheeraz, he did fight the likes of Ammo Williams, who again, I don't think Ammo Williams is a world level fighter, but you get a baseline. You beat Ammo Williams. Yes, he did, you know, there were scares in that fight, right? But you saw enough in that fight to feel, okay, right, you know, he has a bit of something, Sheeraz. So, again, really and truly, my sort of conclusions for this fight, I think Hamzah Sheeraz has enough to outbox Edgar Berlanga. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Brit, I'm saying that because I genuinely believe that. I'm not saying he necessarily stops Berlanga, I don't think he does. I think Berlanga is tough, to be fair. He's shown that he takes a good shot. I don't think there are the same concerns over Berlanga's chin as there are for Sheeraz's chin. So again, when you've got an aggressive fighter like Berlanga, there is always the chance he catches Sheeraz and knocks him out. But I imagine that Hamzah will have enough nous to be able to negotiate those 12 rounds, to be able to get to points and to be able to win a UD. So I'm going for Hamzah Sheeraz on points here. I think Hamzah Sheeraz will outbox Edgar Berlanga. I think he will just be a little bit too cute and just have a bit too much when it comes to sort of his boxing ability. And yeah, I just think that this is going to be a win on points for Hamzah Sheeraz. But what do you think? What are you saying? I'd be interested to know what you're thinking for this fight. It is one that definitely divides opinion. It does seem to be that the UK side of things are very much on board with Sheeraz and the US side of things are very much on board with Berlanga. But I'm just trying to be as objective as possible. I don't rate Berlanga. I'm not saying I rate Sheeraz really highly either. But I think he is just a bit more put together than Edgar Berlanga. And so I'm backing Sheeraz in this one. What do you think? You let me know. Take it easy. Thank you. Cheers.